It should come as no surprise to anyone listening to this video that this is going to be a massive offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers. What we learned in 2025 is something that some of us learned in 2022, is that this particular group that ended this season, their ceiling was defined. It was defined as a winning season and bowing out of the playoffs in the wild card. It happened once again for the 7th consecutive time they lost in the first round of the postseason. And because of that, it's a new era. Mike Tomlin walked away from the Pittsburgh Steelers. So for the first time in 19 years, there's going to be a new coaching staff. There's going to be a new quarterback, which that's not anything new. This will be the 6th time in 2026 that there is a different week 1 starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And more overhaul could be coming. Who knows what happens on the free agency market? Because the Steelers don't have the one thing that they have had for nearly 2 decades, which is the Tomlin factor. How many times, whenever the Steelers introduce a free agent signing, whether it be Patrick Queen, whether it be Deshaun Elliott, whether it be, the trade of DK Metcalf, everyone talks about wanting to play for Mike Tomlin. Shoot, that was the only reason it feels like Aaron Rodgers decided he wanted to play football in 2025. That's no longer here. So what happens whenever the Tomlin factor is gone? What types of free agents are Omar Khan and whoever the new head coach are going to be able to wrangle? But that's not the only overhaul that could be coming. Take a look at the veterans. What happens with Cameron Heyward? Does he retire? Does he decide that he'll play under a different head coach and still be a one-helmet guy with the Pittsburgh Steelers? I'd imagine he plays. Because when he said he has more in the tank, when he said he wants to play a certain amount of years, I believe him. I don't think taking away the head coach is going to take away his desire to play the sport that he loves. But it remains to be seen. It's a question that remains unanswered. And then there's TJ Watt. The question that has been circulating is, will TJ Watt be traded this offseason? And the first thing that I ask whenever that question is presented is, why now? Why would he be traded now? Is it because Mike Tomlin is gone and this team, for the first time in forever, is going to take a step back in order to try to take some steps forward? Or is it just because it's time? Watt's value is still significant. It might be less significant than it would have been a couple seasons ago, but he is still viewed around the league as a game wrecker. Hence the reason that every week when you go in to Sunday, you see him getting chipped, double teamed, and everything that goes on top of that. I understand he's coming off of back-to-back years where the results weren't as glamorous as they had been for the majority of his career. And I understand that he'll be going into his age 32 season in 2026. But the value is still significant for TJ Watt. And the other reason that now might finally be the time where it makes some sense, because I don't think at any point before this offseason it ever made sense for the Steelers to move on from and trade TJ Watt. But I'll say this offseason, it does a little bit, because his replacements are here. They're in the building. TJ Watt in 2025 played 14 games in the regular season, collected 7 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, and 19 quarterback hits. There's 3 guys behind him that are all pushing for playing time and pushing for significant playing time. Alex Highsmith has long been an underrated piece to this Steelers defense, an underrated edge rusher in the league. He's a leader on this defense. And while everybody for the past couple of seasons have said, well, whenever you trade Alex Highsmith, I think that there's a chance that he could outlast TJ Watt and become the leader of that edge rushing room. And when it comes to the replacement, you're not going to replace the all-pro level of TJ Watt. But could you replace the TJ Watt that you saw this year? Could you replace the TJ Watt that you saw last year? Collectively, you can, I think, with Nick Herbig and Jack Sawyer. I mentioned Watt had 7 sacks, 10 tackles for loss, 19 quarterback hits in 14 games. Well, Nick Herbig in 15 games, just one more, had 7.5 sacks, 13 tackles for loss, and 18 quarterback hits. So in year 3, he had just as good of a season as TJ Watt statistically. The impact isn't there as much, right? The interceptions aren't there. Nick Herbig did have an interception, but TJ Watt had 2. The forced fumbles and fumble recoveries aren't there as abundantly as they are with TJ Watt. But I think the pros are starting to catch up to the cons. I'm not going to say they outweigh the cons. They don't. I'd be stupid if I said that. But I think there are pros that are creeping into the conversation to trading TJ Watt. That brings us to the price. Because I mentioned, the value is still significant. It's not what it was, but it's significant. Is there a chance that you trade TJ Watt and package him with the 21st overall pick to get into the top 10 at the NFL draft in Pittsburgh? I think that that's a possibility. Is that enough for TJ Watt? Maybe you get a little bit extra. Maybe you get a 3rd round pick for it as well. Maybe you get a 4th round pick on top of it as well. But if you're able to get into the top 10, you could draft maybe a top wide receiver like Carnell Tate and actually add to this offense for whatever quarterback ends up coming to town. You give him a 2nd wide receiver option on the opposite side of DK Metcalf. Maybe you bring in a defensive back to fill out your safety room to help avoid those huge blown coverage chunk plays that you gave up in the final couple of weeks of the season. Or if you're confident in it, I'm not particularly, but if you're confident in it and you're able to utilize TJ Watt to get into the top 10, maybe you take your quarterback. Again, I'm not sold on this class outside of Fernando Mendoza, so I wouldn't go quarterback. I would go more so top wide receiver, top defensive back, maybe a Caleb Downs, for example. But that's just an example of the price. Now, here's the thing. If you trade TJ Watt, you're not saving a lot of money. According to Spotrac, if you trade TJ Watt before June 1st, you're dealing with $30 million in dead cap space in 2026. If you trade him after June 1st, which takes out the possibility of what I just laid out and trading up in the draft, you have a $10 million dead cap hit in 26 and a $20 million dead cap hit in 27. So at the end of the day, when I look at this and when the question is asked, because it's been asked all over the place in just over a week since the Steelers season ended, is there a chance the Steelers trade TJ Watt? I think more so than ever before, the answer to that is yes, there is a chance. Would I be upset if he wasn't? Would I be upset if whenever they show up in the last week of July at training camp that TJ Watt's still on this team? Not in the slightest. They bring him back. And that's ultimately something that you can be excited about. But for the first time ever, in my opinion, for the first time, it makes sense to at least have the conversation, to at least wonder what is out there in a potential TJ Watt trade. And I'd imagine that the Steelers front office is going to think the same thing. It's similar to what we see across Pittsburgh sports, right? If you're going to trade this player that's meant a lot to the franchise, that is still playing at a high level, the price has to be high. If the price is right, it makes some sense. But the price has to be right. And if it's not, you're not trading away TJ Watt for a substandard return. You have to win, not win, but you have to get good value back in that trade. So it's going to be an interesting offseason on many different fronts. And for the first time in forever, this is actually a storyline worth following. It'll be interesting to see what the Steelers decide with TJ Watt. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, if you enjoy this content, to like, share, subscribe. We have Pirates content coming out on the channel. We'll have some more pro wrestling content coming out on the channel as well. And of course, we'll bring you our typical dose of Steelers and Penguins as we do every single week. But that's going to do it for this video. We'll see you guys next time.